I'd like to introduce our last speaker for the day, Rick Adams, who is Professor Emeritus now, or not, at the University of Northern Colorado, who's going to talk about, I think, what everybody wants to hear about, bats. Slide presenter.
Okay, yeah, do something with that, I guess. Is that all right?
You'll probably need to hold it for him to hear you.
Really? Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. I hate holding mics. Anyway, thanks for sticking around. And my name is Rick Adams, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about bats today. I appreciate the invite, and I love jump at the opportunity to talk to people, particularly captive audiences. So security could lock all the doors. That would be awesome. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the general biology of bats before moving into kind of the emphasis of this particular summit in terms of pollination. So what is a bat? Well, I think we could probably understand them as mammals, so they're only true flying mammal. There's about 1,500 species worldwide. And to put that into perspective, there's about 6,000 species of mammals currently on Earth. So does anybody know what the second most speciose mammal group is? Rodents win, yes. About 45% of rodents or of mammals are rodents, and 25% are bats. So I like to tell people, if you're a mammal on Earth today, there's about a 70 to 75% chance that you're either a bat or a rat. Okay, so yeah, they compose about 25% of all mammals. Bats kind of live at the edge of what I call mammalness. They really are kind of extreme in the particular sense of physiology. They have a heart rate of about 1,200 beats a minute. That's 20 beats a second when they're in flight. Shrews also, somebody mentioned shrews. Shrews have a similar heart rate, and bats probably inherited that from shrews since they are closely related to one another. Because they have such high metabolic rates, they eat a tremendous amount of food, and this has to do a lot with why they are so important ecologically, particularly in controlling insect populations, but also dispersal of fruit and pollination of plants. They use a lot of resource base, and so they move a lot of energy and nutrients through ecosystems. They use sonar, we call it echolocation. It's extremely loud. We're lucky we can't hear it. It's about anywhere from 2 to 5 times above our hearing range. But if you put your ear 4 inches away from a smoke detector, that's about 105 decibels, and bats' echolocation is about 110 decibels. So we're lucky we can't hear them at night, right? It'd be hard to sleep. Bats still have good eyesight. You see this guy here. He has large eyes, quite good vision. Some of them have cones and can see in the blue spectrum. But they have very good black and white vision. And lifespan of bats is variable, but there have been bats that have been recaught in the wild that are over 40 years old. So they have these very high metabolic rates, but they have these very long lifespans. It's very different than what we see in most mammals. Why it's a bat is a bit of a different question. As Aristotle said, nature does nothing uselessly, so bats must be useful, right? And as it turns out, Darwin also talked a bit about bats and understood that the vertebrate limb is the same no matter what vertebrate you're talking about. So from amphibians on, the limb is the same, pentadactyl limb. But it's been pushed around in 3 groups for flight. And it's only been these 3 groups: pterosaurs, which have gone extinct, in birds and bats, which have winged on into the present. but each is an independent evolutionary pathway, and so the design of the wings are all different from one another. Bats are the only ones that have a solid platform with fingers going all the way through the wing membrane, and that's why they're in the order Chiroptera, chiro meaning hand, ptera meaning wing. But this leads to a very dynamic wing structure, because if you have 4 of your 5 fingers through the wing going from the leading to the trailing edge, by bending your fingers, you can change the lift across the wing quite dramatically. And so bats are amazing acrobats when they fly. But in 600 million years of vertebrate evolution, there's only been 3 groups that have evolved flight. And so flight is very rare in vertebrates. Where do bats come from? Well, the oldest full-body bat fossils come from the Green River Formation, which you were just hearing about in Wyoming. So does this mean bats evolved in Wyoming? Probably not, but it is a possibility. There are similar fossils that are out of Messel, Germany, and there have been some teeth found in China that are dated to 66 million years old. So the Eocene bats from the Green River Formation are estimated to be about 52 million years old. There's 3 specimens that appear to be different genera. And the breakup of Pangaea into Laurasia and Gondwanaland, with bats coming almost certainly from the Laurasian subcontinent. And the origin point is not known, as I mentioned, but it is possibly in North America and maybe Wyoming. Maybe hard to believe, but this is what Wyoming was like in the Eocene. It was tropical to subtropical, very different than what we see today. So what we see is the evolution of bats occurring in the tropics, and the most species of bats living today remain to be tropical. There are 2 suborders of bats. There's the Megachiroptera, these large flying foxes that if you've gone to the old world, like Africa, New Zealand, Indonesia, you will see these guys. They have up to 6-foot wingspans. They range in size from wingspans of just a few inches up to 6 feet. They are all frugivorous and pollinators, and so they're not a very diverse group. There's about 200 species in this suborder. The rest of bats, the Microchiropterans, are much more diverse and make up all of the rest of the diversity. And even this beautiful painted bat from Thailand, which just shows that bats are not all brown and black. Okay. Well, bats and birds winged into the present, but they fly very differently because their wings are very different. This is a little GIF of a goose flying across the screen. It's quite beautiful, almost elegant, I would say. And birds produce flight by using these large pectoralis muscles that bring the wings down to create anti-gravity force and also drive them forward. The backstroke on a bird's wing is passive. But this is, again, a very elegant, stable way of flying, just using really one major muscle group to do this. Mammals have chosen to do it a different way, and bats basically fly it looks quite erratic. I will show you some high-speed video that shows you it's not erratic at all. It's just that they're doing things so quickly that your eyes cannot keep up. Your brain can't process that information. So you're just seeing little glimpses of their flight ability. But if I had to choose which one to ride on, I guess I'd pick the goose. The other one's more like a rodeo, right? So birds and bat wings are different. One of the main differences besides the muscular control, so birds use their pectoralis muscles to create the force of flight. Bats use both their chest and back muscles to produce flight. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But bats have a solid platform for a wing. It's a full membrane in between all the fingers. Birds, however, the wing is mostly feathers. And these feathers are on turnstiles. So when the bird flaps down, all the feathers turn and lock together into a flat platform to create a downward force to keep them up. When they flap back with the upstroke, the feathers turn on a turnstile and the air passes through the wing. So this prevents keeping a downward force when they're trying to fly upward. Bats with this solid platform have to do this quite differently. And so birds fly kind of like this. Okay, if you watch this young bat, we study evolution of flight in the lab, and this is a young bat learning to fly, a Jamaican fruit bat. The wing movement is quite different. It's actually like this. So it's counterclockwise, and when the wing gets to the top, the backstroke is what's driving the animal forward, whereas the downstroke is what's keeping it up. And so, because they don't want to create a downward force with this solid membrane, they have to turn their wings perpendicular to the ground and flap backwards to drive themselves forward. So it's quite a different mechanism. One of the things we discovered a few years ago, 2012, wow, okay, it was more than a few years ago. This is high-speed video shot off the tailgate of my truck, and what you're looking at here is how the bats can use their tail membrane to help support flight. And so the tail membrane is flapping as they do these ground takeoffs, and it's out of sync with the wings slightly. And so when the wings reach the top of the backstroke where they're creating no force, the tail is coming down and keeping them moving forward. We labeled this a third wing in bats. And even if you watch this bat, I don't know if you can see it that well, but because of the lighting, but anyway, they fold up their tail membrane, they bring their legs together to bring that tail membrane up, and then they spread their wings, their tail membrane to create this force. And so anyway, just kind of a cool aside. The other thing that's special about bats is echolocation, and my lab differs with some of the published literature on where echolocation came from. Most consider bats to evolve echolocation, but since shrews have been found to echolocate, we've shown through ontogeny that the way echolocation develops, it looks like they probably inherited it from shrews as a very primitive system and then elaborated upon that into the spectacular sonar that is used today in bats. Of course, it's three-dimensional, so the sound's going back, and just like your vision, everything's bouncing back to their ears, so they have to analyze this information in microseconds. And unlike echolocation that we see in animals like cetaceans, for example, or even shrews, which use series of clicks, bat sonar is actually tonal. And so instead of going they're going wee wee wee. And so what you're looking at here is a sonogram of that, of the what we call frequency modulation of 100 kilohertz down to below 20 kilohertz. They're sweeping that call, and they're sweeping it in about 2 milliseconds of time. They also are using octaves along with the call to generate this tremendous amount of information from the environment as that sound comes back in waves to their ears. Okay, because this is a very expensive modality of life in general, flying is energetically highly expensive, and yelling at the top of your lungs for hours a night. If you have kids, you already know this. It's really tiring. And so bats phase it. Sometimes they're echolocating at a very slow pace, and the slow pace is called a search phase, and they're pulsing their voice about 25 times a second. If they go into an approach phase, they see something out there that looks good, they'll increase it to 50 times a second, And then if they get into within a couple meters of an insect and they really want detailed information, they'll pulse their voice 250 times in 1 second to get that information load into their head. So this is kind of what it sounds like, if we can hear it. It'll get louder. So that's the search phase, approach phase, feeding buzz. Well, you might think bats, they're so acrobatic and have all this fancy sonar system to catch insects. Yes, they eat pollinators, but that's a good thing. Moths have fought back. So bats have been around for at least 52 million years, and so have insects. And so there's been this sort of arms race going on between them. And a lot of insects have, well, at least some insects have developed tympanic organs on the side of their body here, which are finely tuned to the echolocation calls of bats, so they can hear them coming. And when bats go into that feeding buzz, they'll go through evasive maneuvers to try not to get eaten. It gets even better because some of them have a scale in this tympanic organ that they can click, and this clicking is ultrasonic. Okay, it basically jams. What they're attempting to do is to jam the sonar of the bat and confuse the bat into turning away from them. And so it's a really neat system of how insects can avoid getting eaten. Tests that have been done show that bats still catch them about 9 out of 10 times, but 1% increase in reproduction in insects is a huge savings to them, so because they reproduce like crazy. So if you're a beautiful moth flying around on a summer night, enjoying the evening, whether or not you have an ear, this may be the last thing you see. Bats actually catch insects in their wings and tail membranes, so they not only use these for flight, but they use them to scoop up insects and put them into their mouth. Makes sense if you're flying 15, 20 miles an hour. You don't want to catch something in your mouth in most cases. And so this really helps with also making sure that the insects are not running into their body and that kind of thing. It works quite well. And this wasn't discovered until they did slow motion video of this. And as it turns out, this entire motion of catching the insect, bringing it up to the mouth, and kind of doing this backwards somersault takes about 0.2 of a second. Other species are capable of hovering and can actually glean insects off of vegetation. And this is just another way to do it. If you see bats with really long ears like this, it usually means their echolocation is low frequency, which allows them to see these moths through sonar on the leaves, but also to allow them to hear the insects rustling around on the leaves. Okay, well, what about insectivorous bats and ecological services? Ecological services, of course, are what non-human animals do for us. Ecologists don't pay much attention to it, but it's a way to sell their value to the greater public, I guess, so we don't kill everything. So for bats, the ecological services are actually quite tremendous. This is the number of pest species, quote unquote pest species, of agricultural crops just by these 5 bat species that are consumed. So little brown bats eat about 201 species of what would be considered pests. Big brown bats come in second at 180, and these other bats come in a little bit below that. And so bats eat a lot of agricultural pests. And somebody calculated that if we just look at a small colony of big brown bats, 150 of them, this is what they will eat in one summer: 600,000 cucumber beetles, 200,000 June beetles, 160 leaf hoppers, 335,000 stink bugs. Okay, but it's better than that because it's not just what they eat. Because a lot of these, if we just look at cucumber beetles, because a lot of these females are pregnant and lay 110 eggs each, if we do the math on that, just in cucumber beetles, they're preventing the production of 33 million cucumber individuals. It's also been shown that the sonar of bats drives pest species out of croplands. And they've done some playbacks in Europe of just using recordings of bat sonar, and all the pest species exit the crops. In the U.S., bats saved the agricultural industry about $30 billion annually, or at least they did. With white nose syndrome, which came in from Europe, it was brought over here into our system as an invasive fungus. It's killed millions of bats, at least 10 million bats in the eastern U.S. And so a study was done to see how this was affecting pesticide use in croplands. And of course, it had to increase because you didn't have the bats eating the insects anymore. What they generated over just in several counties in New York, where the bats were basically wiped out, was for every 1% increase in pesticide usage, there was a 0.25% increase in infant mortality rate. And between 2010 and 2017, cause of death of 1,300 babies is correlated with this increase in pesticide use. So there's a real cost to this. Hard to quantify in a lot of cases, but that people are trying to understand better how this is affecting human populations. Well, what about natural and ecological services? So bats do a lot for ecosystems, of course. They're major components of ecosystems. One of the main things they do is seed dispersal, and second to insectivory, frugivory is the next most common type of food source for bats. This occurs in both micro and megachiropterans. It's been estimated that they disperse the seeds of at least 550 species and 191 genera in the tropics mostly, but some of it does happen in temperate areas. And so bats are very important for this. In areas that have been clear-cut, in Brazil, for example, the first plants that have been shown to come back to regrow forest are plants that have seeds dispersed by bats. One of my master's students worked with us in Kruger National Park. We were doing a study on epauleted fruit bats. These are megachiropterans that disperse sycamore fig trees. Sycamore fig trees are keystone species in the park. Almost every animal species in the park uses them at some time of year. We wanted to see how bats affected germination of those seeds. So we put up plastic under feeding trees at night. And when we didn't get chased off by elephants or lions or hippos or something, we could collect spats from the bats, so where the seeds have gone through the GI tract. We then collected seeds from regular figs that had not been eaten by bats. And what she found out basically was 98% of those seeds germinated in her petri dishes, whereas if they hadn't gone through bats, only 2% of them germinated. So bats had a huge effect on the germination of those sycamore fig seeds. But what about pollination? That's what we're here to really talk about, right? There's about 50 species of obligate bat pollinators in the New World, so North, Central, and South America. Up here in northern Mexico and into the U.S., Arizona, for example, are these lesser-nosed bats that pollinate saguaro, organ pipe, and cordon cactus. These cactus have co-evolved with these bats. They open their flowers at night. The flowers are white, so the bats can find them easily. And the shape of the flowers and the shape of the nose of the bat fit together like a lock and key. And this is one of the major adaptations that we see in these obligate pollinators, where the nose and the flowers match up quite specifically and allow for the efficiency of pollen movement. We just go back for a second. I mean, if you look at this bat on the right lower hand corner, you can see how much pollen gets on these bats. So they move a tremendous amount of it around. And so anyway, this happens in the old world as well, but they tend not to be specialized for doing this as much. I just want to digress to Darwin again, because there's a kind of neat story here. Darwin did a book on orchids and pollination of orchids. And this particular species of orchid had a very long pistil of 35 centimeters. And Darwin thought about what could possibly be pollinating this orchid. And so he came up with the hypothesis that there must be an insect, a moth in particular, out there that had a 35 centimeter long tongue. He was ridiculed for this idea. It seemed ridiculous that a moth could have a tongue this long. But as it turns out, in 1903, after Darwin was gone, the moth was found that pollinated this particular flower. Well, we have a similar story in bats. So here's a bat with a very deep corolla. Very deep corolla, and a bat that pollinates this flower. And so the bat is 6 centimeters long, has a 9 centimeter long tongue. So how can this work? Okay, so this bat fly around with its tongue hanging out like this is probably not true. Anyway, investigators put in these test tubes with nectar at the bottom, and you can see how long this bat's tongue is. And, they were just flabbergasted. How can this tongue cannot fit back into the mouth of this animal? It's just not possible. And so if we look at other nectar bats, the tongue originates on the hyoid, just like ours does, and all mammals does. All mammals except Neurofistulata, which is this long-tongued bat. The tongue actually originates on the sternum. And so it can have this tremendously long tongue because it retracts all the way into its chest. Okay, it's pretty neat. So, Darwin would have been proud, I think, if he had figured this out too. There are two types of tongues that are used in these pollinators. One is kind of a filamentous tongue that you see at the top here, and the other is what we call a pump tongue. So it has these grooves along the side of it where it can act as pumps, so they can flex the tongue and pump the nectar into the mouth, whereas the filamentous one is just kind of one where they stick in and the nectar gets in between the filaments and they pull it out, in and out really quickly. And what we see, these are hovering times between two different species that have these two different types of tongues. If you look at Glossophaga here with the filamentous tongue, its hovering time is very short. So it's flying up and then flying away. Whereas Leucophila will fly up and hover for a long period of time, has to stick its tongue down into the nectar and pump the nectar into its mouth. So a couple different ways of doing this, which would suggest that nectar feeding in bats has evolved at least 2 independent times. Okay, plants have done all kinds of things for helping bats find their flowers. So I mentioned I open them at night. A lot of times they're white, so they're easy for the bats to see. But what if it's completely dark out? Okay, eyes are great if it's lit, but sonar is used when it's completely dark. And so in this case, for the larger saguaro and organ pipe cactus, they produce a filamentous, hairy-like structure that actually dampens the echolocation of the bat around the flower. And this makes the flower stand out so the bats can find them more easily. So it's pretty nice of them to do that. There are other plants that put together various types of disc-shaped leaves which can act in various ways. Some of them are lures. Some of them are more like mirrors. And so the lures would be structures that the bats can pick up from any direction that will lure them in, that the flower is ripe and ready to provide them food, essentially. Whereas the mirrors are going to help direct the bat right into the flower, so it reflects directionally back, so the bat can tell how strong the sound is coming back and go right into the flower. And so this is one of those concave mirrors that help direct the bat right into the corolla of the flower. Bats can also tell what type of flower they are by their echolocation signal. And so the plants all have these different flower structures on them that denote to the bat through sound and echolocation what species of flower they're actually pollinating. Okay, well, those are obligate pollinators. There are about 500 species of bats globally that are not particularly adapted to pollinating flowers. They don't have long tongues or long faces or anything like that. And one of those is a Colorado bat. This is a pallid bat, and you can see this. He's eating a scorpion here and a centipede here and scorpion over there. This is a ground foraging bat. So if you're at a Colorado National Monument, you may see these bats. They run around on the ground. Mammalogists that are trapping mice in Sherman live traps would be freaked out because sometimes they open their trap in the morning, there'd be a pallid bat in there because a beetle ran in and the pallid bat followed it. So they eat arthropods on the ground. But some recent observations showed that this bat also visits its flowers, and for nectar or perhaps insects are in the flower that the pallid bat is going after. And this also gives some insight into how this whole idea of pollination in bats may have evolved, that they're really going after the insects in the flower, and things kind of snowballed from there into obligate types of pollinators. Okay, one of the major threats to bats, people. And so irrational fear is still a huge component of bat conservation. The attempts to attach human-borne viruses to bats. I mean, you've seen all the horrible headlines about bats being responsible for Ebola. They are not. There are very few of these viruses. MERS is not a bat virus. Nipah is. Nipah gets into humans because of palm oil collection. Bats will come and drink the palm oil out of the plants, and they can transfer that virus into the oil, and then if it's not pasteurized and people drink it raw, they can pick up Nipah that way. But a lot of mammals carry Nipah, so a lot of mammals come and visit those pots. So it's not just bats. But anyway, it's been a huge conservation challenge since all of this coming. I mean, rabies was bad enough, and they do carry rabies, but all of the propaganda that's been put forth by the media, bats being responsible for COVID-19 and these sorts of things. They have similar viruses. Bats live in caves. They're exposed to a lot of viruses, many of which are brought in by humans that are going in there to mine guano. And so it's, but there's never been any transfer besides NIFA to a human except rabies. Anyway, that's a huge conservation problem, caused irrational fear of bats globally. Merlin Tuttle's been documenting huge colonies of bats and wiped out after CDC has left areas, scaring the hell out of people for bats, going to infect them with Ebola and stuff. So it's kind of a mess. White nose syndrome, as I mentioned before, is caused by a fungus that was brought over from Europe. Caves in Europe had this fungus, and it was brought into our cave systems in New York and has killed millions of bats. It basically is so invasive on the skin that it keeps waking them up during hibernation, and every time they wake up, they burn a week or so worth of brown fat, and so they go into hibernation in November. By February, they've run out of stored fat. They're starving to death, so they fly out of the caves in February in the snowstorms, and colonies of 60,000 bats have been wiped out in one winter. It's a huge, devastating effect on bats. It's here now. It just showed up in Boulder County last year. Bats here don't form really large colonies like that, like they do back east. They are much more segregated in the smaller groups, so we hope that cuts down on the transfer. Of course, the other problem is insectivorous, the loss of insects and other arthropods that bats rely on for food. The plummeting is astonishing, and it's part of an overall generalized pattern of biodiversity collapse and sixth mass extinction event. People argue whether we're in a sixth mass extinction or not, but because some argue we haven't really lost that many species, so it's not a mass extinction event, but mass extinction events start with population declines. We have these massive population declines going on. So we're entering into this type of challenge in the near future. And we talk about climate change, but biodiversity collapse, if anything is going to take out humanity, it's going to be that. This is what we've lost since 1970. 52% of the birds, mammals, fish, reptiles, and amphibian populations, and seems to be no end in sight. 76% for freshwater species, is just devastating. You may have seen this study. Okay, why is this happening? The biomass of mammals on Earth today. Okay, biomass is the dry weight of any organic organism. Okay, so this is published in PNAS, but bottom line, 90% of mammalian biomass on Earth today are humans and their domesticated animals. Only 4% of mammals on Earth today are wildlife. Should be the other way around, but it's not. The Bat Conservation International got us together last year, about 100 of us bat biologists, and to work through and try and figure out really where bats are these days. And the bottom line is about 52% of bats in the New World are in severe threat. Mexico is probably showing the highest risk species, and these three are actually pollinators that are the most severely threatened. Okay, well, how to help bats. Education's key. Trying to keep people from not freaking out when they see them. Pollinator gardens, of course, support bats as well as pollinators. Greater protection by local, state, and federal agencies would certainly help. Pesticides, of course, bioaccumulate in bats to tremendous levels very quickly because they're eating huge amounts. They eat their body mass in food a night. So if you could, be like me sitting down and eating 170 pounds of food for dinner, I'm going to amass a lot of stuff doing that. And so with pesticides and stuff, it really bioaccumulates quickly in bats. And what else can we do to help bats? Bat houses are a great idea, particularly with exclusion projects. Got to be kind of careful with them because only certain species use them. So you don't want to really put them in natural areas because the bats that are most habituated to humans are the ones that use these houses. And so you can upset the balance in natural areas where those populations are increasing for a couple species, and that's going to cause greater competition with other native species. Okay, what about bats in Colorado? We have 21 species and 2 families. They're all insectivorous, except for that pollinating pallid bat. And the highest frequency of diversity is on the western slope in the desert regions. Foothills are pretty high, and there are pockets of even greater diversity sort of south of Colorado Springs area. Okay, bats of Boulder County, we have 10 species here, 10 beautiful species. The small-footed myotis is the smallest bat in the area, has about a 4-foot wingspan, weighs less than a dime, weighs 4 grams. How do you pack a mammal into that, About a 4-inch wingspan. 4 foot, oh. Yeah, well, 4-foot wingspan. Yeah, weighs 4 grams, yeah. Okay, so yeah, they're tiny. And if you see these guys flying around, you'll notice them because they're only about this big. They look like a moth. And they fly very slowly. The long-eared myotis is a gleaning species that occurs up in more or less dug fir habitat. It does use ponderosa pine some, but foothill species. Little brown myotis used to be the most common bat in North America. We petitioned to have it listed as endangered because its loss is due to white nose syndrome. Canada has already listed it as endangered. Our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has not. But massive losses of them in the eastern U.S. The fringe myotis, unfortunately, is declining in this area. It is a species that was found with white nose syndrome on it last year. A couple of dead individuals showed up, one in Longmont, one in Lyons. And so we're kind of worried about them because we've been tracking them the last 2 summers and at maternity sites, and the numbers have been going down. Hopefully there'll be some immunity there. The long-legged myotis is the largest of the myotis in the area. This guy is highly susceptible to heat. Typically they would come down in the spring, stay through June, maybe early July, and then move back up because it gets too hot down here. I was doing elevational Klein sonar analysis and have been finding that they haven't been coming down here anymore, except in cooler years they will. But if it's a hot summer, they'll stay up. Big brown bats are one of the larger species. These guys are out early. They're the first bat you'll see out usually. They have about a foot wingspan, so they're pretty noticeable. And they're beetle specialists. And the reason they come out early is because most beetles are diurnal, and they take advantage of that, scarfing up beetles. And then after it gets dark, they kind of turn over the moths. Townsend's big-eared bat is everybody's darling. There's only about 8 known maternity colonies in the state. They're imperiled. We have one up at Malaria Cave, which is the reason we gated that a few years ago. We started out with a seasonal closure that worked for a while, but then it was getting more incursions. Population in there dropped from 25 adult individuals down to 7. And so we decided to gate it. Now it's up to about 40 individuals that are using that site now. Hoary bats, they're the largest bats, 16-inch wingspan, about 35 grams, very fast flyers. If you see one of these guys go by, you will definitely notice. And they're like badgers with wings, but they're beautiful. They're orange, black, and white. And this is the only mammal species that has made it to Hawaii on its own, and also the Galapagos. So these guys are amazing migratory bats that can fly long distances, even 600 miles out into the Pacific. Silver-haired bats are related to hoary bats, but they're just wonderful to be around. Hoary bats want to take your head off. Silver-haired bats are always smiling. And so they're just like, oh, let me go, please. But anyway, they're black with silver hair on their back. They're kind of like a silverback gorilla, you know. But they're really quite beautiful. Tricolored bats, these bats are devastated back east due to white nose syndrome. They are recent newcomers here. So they've been around since the mid-'80s, but it's usually been males and just one individual found here or there. But we found reproductive females in 2017, and we've been tracking them ever since, and their populations are really rebounding here. So Colorado might be sort of a refugium for them to recover if white nose doesn't get hold of them in our environments. Okay, and just as a fun note, we found my first publication ever as an undergraduate was on prairie dogs. And so I feel like I've come full circle here. We started putting bat detectors in prairie dog colonies, and they're extremely active with bats. And so we ran 4 sites with detectors in the colonies and detectors 100 meters outside of the colonies, and found that even forest bats, which generally don't like to be out in the open, come out in these prairie dog colonies and forage when they're available. And the difference is, you know, it's not even close. It's astonishing how active these prairie dog colonies are. And prairie dogs, we know, as ecosystem engineers, they provide habitat for at least 250 other species of animals, a lot of insects. And so this is probably what's attracting the bats to those colonies, probably much more diverse in insects and abundance as well. And so, bats and prairie dogs seem to have this interesting relationship. There is a possibility that some bats might be using abandoned burrows as summer roost sites. That we're still trying to figure out. And if we think about prairie dogs, they should be listed as endangered. Less than 1% of their historical populations still exist. So, this was actually repeated by a master's student at the University of Kansas, and he found the same effect in prairie dog colonies out in the Kansas grasslands. So that was kind of neat. If you want to learn more about bats, their second edition, Bats of the Rocky Mountain West, came out in July, and highly updated, so about 20 years of update information. It's amazing how much we've learned in the last 20 years about bats. And it's available at Boulder Bookstore if you want to support them. And thanks.
Thanks so much, Rick, for fascinating talk. I think everybody's probably got a couple of questions, right, before we end the day. So raise your hand, and Gianna can bring you a mic.
How to phrase this? Have you noticed differences in bat foraging practices or success in places with wind farms, solar panel farms, agrivoltaics, or oil centers?
Yes, that's a great question. So a lot of the wind turbine work that's been done, I have not done it personally, but USGS is very much involved with that, and they have a whole crew of bat biologists that are doing national surveys. And of course, we all want clean energy, right? As it turns out, wind farms take out tens of thousands of bats, particularly migratory species like hoary bats and silver-haired bats are the main ones. And they do it in a couple different ways. You would think they run into the blades, and in some cases they do. But it's also what's called barotrauma, that behind those blades, particularly when they're not going very fast, it causes a drop in barometric pressure. And the drop in barometric pressure is so severe that when these bats fly into it, essentially their lungs explode. And so this Canadian graduate student went and collected all of these hoary bats from a wind site and did autopsies on them because she couldn't see any external damage, like they had run into anything. And all their chests were exploded, full of blood. And then they measured it and found that the barometric pressure is so low that it's 4 times lower than it would take to explode a rat's lungs. And bats are much smaller than rats. So it's been very, very devastating. Now, there are lots of ways to deal with it. Feathering the units to, once they get, most of the mortality is happening at very slow wind speeds that are not generating electricity. And so the companies have gone to now retrofitting them where they reach a certain wind speed, low wind speed, they'll shut them off. And this could help tremendously. So the industry is trying to do the right thing in a lot of cases. Now these wind farms are put in areas where it's windy, and the same winds that bats are using to migrate on. And so that's why the conflict is there. In terms of solar panels have been shown to affect insects quite dramatically, and that, of course, can then affect bats. Other problems associated with oil and gas, not much work is done. I had an undergraduate who put sonar detectors at fracking sites, oil sites, and we found that bats avoid them. We don't know if it's the noise or it's creating some sort of ultrasonic hum that drives them off or whatever, but bats are clearly avoiding these sites. We did 4 of them around Greeley, and bats were excluded from those areas. So.
Why does the solar
It has to do with UV absorption, and insects see it in UV a lot. And so it has something to do with affecting, if I remember correctly, the UV and which affects their reproductive state and that sort of thing. So they're not reproducing. That's the way I understand it.
Hi, I'm curious about the diet composition.
Yep.
So when you're saying insectivorous, are they exclusively eating insects? Are they supplementing with any sugar sources, or fructivorous things would have to be tropical? What does the complete diet look like?
It's curious. The fruit-eating bats do supplement with insects, but it's not known that insectivorous bats eat anything other than insects. And it leads to a nutrient problem with insects, even though the chitin is pretty good roughage. But on the other hand, insects are, for example, very low in calcium. And it's been shown that females, when they're lactating for young, females give birth to young anywhere from 20 to 40% of their body size. So that'd be like a 100-pound woman giving birth to a 40-pound child. Okay, so I don't want to hear this whining about these little, 8-pound kids, So, just kidding. But I know it's got to be horribly painful. But anyway, so the young are born so at a large size, and then they're lactating for about 2 months. And from birth, growth to adulthood happens in about 3 weeks. They're adult size in 3 weeks. And who's supplying all the energy for that? Mom. Okay, and so this tremendous amount of calcium is needed, and a tremendous amount of water is needed. The lactate's 75% water. And we did an experiment where we pit tagged lactating females from a roost and non-reproductive females from the roost. And the lactating females came to drink at a water source that we had a plate antenna underneath the water that could pick up their pit tags. And it showed that lactating females came to visit 13 times more than non-lactating females. So they're requiring 11 times more water than a non-reproductive female. But the calcium is a problem, and it's been shown that female bats will lose 50% of their bone mass in calcium by lactating for their young. Now, they have to get that back somehow. And what we did is we went around and tested water sources where females and their young are coming to drink. The males generally are segregated from females for foraging and drinking in the summer. And sure enough, the water holes they were coming to were the highest in dissolved calcium. So somehow they can tell there's calcium in the water, and they're bringing their young there because they're growing a skeleton as well, and they replenish. But when these females go into hibernation, they've been seen licking limestone, wet limestone in caves and stuff, trying to get calcium back into their system. And so the females are under tremendous amounts of stress. Bats also have a funny mating cycle. They're going through swarming and copulation right now. Okay, and so, but the females are not going to ovulate an egg till April. So that means they're storing male sperm in their uterus, millions of male sperm embedded in their uterus, each one sucking a little bit of energy to stay alive for the next 4 or 5 months while the females are in hibernation. And so the females need more fat than the males do because they have to support the sperm also over winter. And so then when they come out in April, they will ovulate and release the sperm from the uterine wall. And this is called delayed fertilization. So the egg will then be fertilized and development will start. But that separation means they have to store that sperm, which is almost unheard of in mammals because typically mammal body temperature denatures sperm. And so, but because they're basically in an ice box all winter, right above freezing, it works that way. So anyway, yeah, their reproductive cycles are really different than most mammals.
Awesome. I think in the sake of time, we're probably going to call questions at that. If you've got a question for him, come up and see Rick right after. We've only got like 5 more minutes to go. So
no worries.
Thanks so much for such a fascinating talk.